You know, I'm getting really close to trying to attempt to start the engine here in the Beast. If you look behind me here, you can see I've rigged up a little system whereby I can clean the fuel injection pump and just see how well it's delivering fuel. So we've already got the plugs out of it. We've oiled the cylinders, so we're getting close, but I really need to get this thing out of the shop because we're going to be pumping a lot of fumes into the air even before we light the fire to it, okay? So just yesterday, I received the final parts from Martin Morminghausen at 600airsuspension.com. And I thought I'd show these to you because if you haven't been around these air suspension cars, you may not be aware that there's more to the system than just the airbags and the leveling valves. That's right. There's a lot of other little things that you have to be concerned about. And once again, Martin, he's the expert. When you see what he's done with these parts, you're going to be impressed, let me tell you. But I want to talk about this part right here because we're going to be able, hopefully by the end of the day or tomorrow, we're going to be able to get the rest of these parts on, bleed the brakes, and we're going to be able to charge the air suspension system from a compressor. No, it won't be from the compressor on the engine, it'll be from our air compressor, and we'll be putting air into this tank. This is the big, heavy-duty air reservoir tank that's mounted. It's mounted right underneath that front left headlight there, right underneath the fender. And this is what holds your reserve compressed air. So it's almost like an oxygen tank, so to speak. But there's a number of things related to this tank right here that can cause problems with the system, primarily due to leaks. So we're going to talk about that. Also, some of you may not know what this is. Isn't that a cute little, you're probably thinking, what is that, Ken? Is that a filter? Well, there is a filter there, but it's not only just a filter. So I'm going to show you these parts up close and kind of explain what they do, what some of the problems can be with them if they're not working properly, and then I'll turn the camera off and get back to work. Let me begin by explaining the design and function of this tank. You know, it mounts vertically like this. Behind the headlight, you have, this is a inlet line here, and this is the outlet line. And here on the bottom, you have a hole for a drain. Because like any air compressor, this tank can collect moisture and condensation over time, and you need to drain that. Notice there's a filter there. And then on the side right here is a typical Schrader valve, like you see on a tire. So this is the fill point when using auxiliary compressed air. So you can already see that there are three potential areas for leaks in this tank. Number one, if the check valve is not working properly, this is where the check valve screws onto the tank. If the check valve, if the O-rings are leaking or the check valve is not sealing, then compressed air is going to leak back out of the tank, okay? Now this check valve has been rebuilt. Look at how nice the plating on that. So Martin gets these, takes them apart, rebuilds them, and then has them replated before sending them back to the customer. Same thing with the drain valve here. You know, he's taken this drain valve apart and made sure that it's, you know, there's a clip in here that can make this come apart, and you can see how this screws right into the bottom of the tank. So you've got to make sure you have a good sealing O-ring here, which could leak, and of course you need to make sure that the drain is sealed. What you do is you just get under the car and push on it like this, see that? And then any moisture, water will come out of the nipple here. So this is something that you need to be aware of. You need to make sure this is working properly, and once again, I've got that rebuilt, so I shouldn't have to worry about that for quite some time. Now let's put the tank aside here and take a look at this other unit. This is the alcohol reservoir feed assembly and the intake air filter. A lot of people don't realize this, but this is a critical air filter. This is what filtrates the air going into the compressor. So if you have a plugged filter, and Martin says he takes a lot of these apart and they're all disintegrated inside. They're all plugged up, so you're not getting good clean, or you may have restricted intake air. So this is something that really gets neglected, is these filters. And then this is the alcohol reservoir tank and delivery system that puts a fine mist of alcohol into the system. So if this isn't working properly, then you're going to have some problems down the road, particularly if you drive in very cold climates. So if you have one of these units right here, I highly recommend that you send this off to Martin and have it inspected and rebuilt. Look, once again, look at I even had some dents in this filter housing, and when he took this apart, he even straightened those dents out. So that's a mighty fine looking piece of equipment. So okay, this needs to go back on. These parts need to go back on. And then we're going to see if we can get this car to really rise off the ground. I forgot to mention in the last scene, the third item, of course, is the little release valve inside this nipple. That's your Schrader valve. You can test this like you test any tire valve to see whether it's leaking. Just put a little spit on it and see if it bubbles up. But it's not difficult. This is not a specialized part to go ahead and replace that. A Schrader valve, if it's old, just replace it, okay? And I should mention also, I've mentioned this in one of my other videos. 2 days ago we installed all the valves, but we paid particular attention to cleanliness. And I can't stress this enough. Martin stresses this also, that you do not want any, whether I'm working with my tank, whether I'm working with, my alcohol device, I don't want any dirt. You don't even want any fine particles of dirt to get into the system. Because if they work their way down into one of the leveling valves, all those fine little valves and little O-rings in there, and you get a leak, that's when the car goes down. And that's when we get really frustrated. Those of us who've owned these air suspension cars, there's nothing more frustrating than to come out to the garage and see the old 6.3 or the 3.5 or the 4.5 or the 600, sitting down on the ground, okay? So be real careful anytime you're working around the system that you don't introduce any dirt at all. You want to be super clean, like if you were working on a transmission. And when you're cleaning parts, always use alcohol. Don't use petroleum products. What we did before we installed the valves is we took this pump sprayer and filled it full of denatured alcohol. We just sprayed the daylights out of every one of the lines. We went underneath the car, we cleaned all the fittings with a brush and alcohol, and we spray cleaned it, and then we came up top and we sprayed it again. So we're blowing everything from the top down. Then we installed the main valve right over here, and then we installed the leveling valves. So I know if you're not working on one of these cars, this is just a point of information, but if you own one of these and you're working on the air suspension system, pay particular attention to cleanliness, okay? All right, so with that said, I'm going to get to work here and get these parts back on the beast. And when we get it ready to go, we'll come back and we'll film filling the system, and you can watch it come off the ground, because once again, this is a story of the rise of the beast. The first rise is the suspension. The next rise is the engine.